Welcome to Unclouded Eye. I'm Ashley Brooks.
And I'm Ty Gowan, who is happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're happy to be here because we are the source for your astrological weekly forecast and cosmic chit chat.
So before we hit record, you were starting to tell me a story, and I think it's best if you share it with all of us at the same time, Ash.
Okay, hopefully my mom doesn't mind, but my mom listened to our Urban Legends episode recently, and you had shared about an urban legend that you heard at school about a naked man in the woods.
Yeah.
And my mom called and was like, so there actually was a naked man in the woods, but in Biddeford in the 70s.
Oh my God. You have to tell me.
So Biddeford is a town in Maine. It's not near our hometown, but I don't think this would be the same naked man, but who knows, really?
My naked man might not have even existed. Are you talking about a real...
I'm talking about a living, breathing naked man.
Okay, set me up. It's Biddeford, 1974.
1971.
1971.
So my mom was 14 years old, and one of her best friends had moved to Biddeford, and so she was in a different town. So my mom would sometimes go over for the weekend to go stay with her friend, and they would, go do things. And so this girl had a crush on a boy, and she really wanted to go see him. But the address he had given her was in the woods. And so she was like, I can't call ahead because he's in the woods. And my mom was like, what are we doing?
You can't go.
No, I know. And they were with a third girl who was, my mom didn't know that well, but it was a friend of her friend who had moved there. So the three of them decided, okay, safety in numbers, we'll go into the woods. So they go into the woods. They walk for like 20 minutes into the woods. And this young man, I guess he's a teenager, was in this cave in the woods. And he had a couple other girls with him, and he was kind of like preaching to them, almost like very much like a cult. And my mom was like, no, thank you. And they stayed for maybe a few minutes. And then the girl was like, I don't like this guy anymore. This is really weird. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't like cave church.
Yeah, I'm all set with cave church. And this is like 71. So this is, sort of like weird hippie cults that were going on. So I got to say, like, my mom never shared this story with me growing up. Like, this is my first time hearing it. Okay, it gets even weirder than this. So they start to leave. They've got a 20-minute walk out of the woods. They're just walking away from this guy in a cave who's talking to these girls. And it seems like he's a bit older. He's like 16, 17, whatever. And so they're going out of the woods when all of a sudden they hear something behind them, and they turn, and there's a naked man chasing them.
The preacher?
No, it's a different naked man.
Oh my God.
It's like,
what?
He was like in his 40s, and my mom said he was a little overweight. And he's chasing them.
That's what she took from it.
Through the woods. And so they start running, obviously, because there's a naked man chasing them.
Yeah, wind him.
And the third girl, the girl my mom didn't know very well, was falling behind. My mom's like, he's gaining on you. You got to hurry up. But he started to get winded because he was out of shape. And so they all got out of the woods, and they were, horrified. But I was like, did anyone call the police? She's like, no, I don't think so. Like, we didn't even know exactly where we were or like what had happened. And I was like, is this man related to that weird cave church? Because it seems like way too big a coincidence for there to be two really strange people in the woods at the same time. And she's like, well, we hadn't seen him. He wasn't a part of it when we were there. So what's going on?
That's insane.
Yeah.
And so many red flags of this is the epitome of, what was it, the 80s, where it's like, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your kids are?
Yeah. My mom said she didn't really go back there after that.
Yeah, good. Never.
Yeah. Because they had another really weird experience. So that one we can say for another time.
We have to grab your mom and head back to Biddeford. That's the only choice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that this naked man would be like very elderly if he's still around. But
we just need to find the cave church if they haven't built like a shopping complex on top of it.
Oh my gosh. I don't know what was going on in Biddeford in the 70s, but...
Well, I mean, like, here's your PSA that no man is ever worth a 20-minute walk in the woods for a cave sermon.
Yeah, I think they were good on that.
Yeah.
I don't think her friend ever pursued that boy again.
Well, let's help our viewers make better choices this week with your astrological forecast. What's going on?
Okay, so on Monday, July 15th, we have there's no other way to say it. It's not a great transit.
Oh.
So we're starting the week off with
naked men in the woods, cave churches, and a
Yeah. So Mars is moving into conjunction with Uranus at 10:04 a.m. Eastern time on Monday, the 15th. And this is
I thought we were pro conjunction on this podcast.
Conjunction is neutral, Ty.
Okay.
It's neutral, it's powerful, it's potent, but remember what I said, when the planets involved are malefic or have possibly negative influences, it's going to intensify that.
Damn. Okay. Lay it on me.
Mars and Uranus are both kind of that. So Mars conjunct Uranus could make for tempers that are very wild and unpredictable and out of control. People are very stubborn. Because it's in Taurus. Taurus is a very stubborn, grounded earth sign. You might see people just flaring up and having a hard time controlling their tempers or their energy.
And did you say this was today?
Yeah, Monday the 15th.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Mars transits kind of last a few days.
Okay,
We could feel it throughout the week.
Okay.
I don't want to like put that on people because it's always what you make of it. But it's kind of like a weather forecast. Like, maybe it's a little bit of a turbulent storm this week. So the other thing that this can do is it can make for a lot of restless energy. It's just hard to calm down. It just feels like heightened energy, which is why some people are getting like angry because that energy is building them. So my best advice to you, you got to burn that energy off.
Okay.
Exercise, go for a walk, go for a hike. Maybe don't go into the cave church woods, but go for a different type of hike.
Any other type of hike.
Yeah, exactly. And, I got to let the naked man go.
Always let the naked men go.
I got to let that go. Okay. So the Mars Uranus conjunction. Yeah. So if you're noticing people getting really frustrated or, tempers flaring, don't really engage with it. Like, I probably wouldn't. I would probably find another outlet for your energy because it's going to be going in circles this week.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't contribute to it. Don't add fuel to the fire.
Makes sense.
Okay. So then we have a couple quiet days, which is nice because that gives us some time to...
Especially since Mars is still burning on.
Mars is doing its thing with Uranus. So Thursday, July 18th, the sun is sextile Uranus. So the sun is kind of joining into this Uranian energy. And the sun is currently in the last few degrees of Cancer, and it's sextiling over to Uranus at 10 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday, the 18th. This is a really nice transit for breaking out of routine, introducing a little spontaneous energy into your day, and also just expressing yourself. Like, if you're feeling like you might notice more people wearing like funky colors that day, or people just being more expressive of who they are. There's more of like a nonconformist energy, but in a positive light, not like just being rebellious for the sake of it, but really showing you who you are to the world. And so, yeah, breaking away from routine, breaking away from expectations. So that's a pleasant transit to follow that Mars-Uranus one. Saturday, July 20th, we have Mars sextiling Neptune. So there's a lot of Mars, Neptune, and Uranus stuff happening this week. Those are the heavy hitters of the week.
Okay.
So Mars is at 29 degrees of Taurus. It's about to move into Gemini. Actually later this day, and Neptune is at 29 degrees of Pisces.
So right on the cusp, both of them.
Yeah, both of them are right on that end point. So if you remember what I said about the 29th degree, it always makes things a little more unstable and strong. So this is happening at 11:17 a.m. on Saturday the 20th, but Mars sextile to Neptune is really great for inspired action.
Okay.
So I would describe this as suddenly getting an impulse to go do something, and if you follow that impulse, something cool could happen.
Oh.
But it's all about taking action.
And chances, it sounds like.
Yeah. It's so, because it's at the 29th degree, it could feel really important to do it, and it could be hard to ignore.
Okay.
So really pay attention to your impulses and urges this day, as long as they're obviously like healthy ones.
Can I ask an advanced question?
Yeah.
Jupiter being the dominion of luck, where is that right now? Is he going to help out with that? Or is it a lucky chance if we take this action?
I mean, Jupiter is currently in Gemini right now, and Mars is about to enter Gemini. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that Jupiter is necessarily in play, but I don't think that because this is a sextile, it's a gentle element. So I don't think that this is like, oh, this could be really awful.
Okay, so Jupiter's on the bench. It's not your lucky shot, but you should still take the moment if you feel compelled.
The one advice that I will give you is to make sure that even though you are going for this action, maybe take a minute to study yourself, because there could be, like, if you just rush into it, like, you could fumble the ball. to carry the metaphor on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And then Mars does enter Gemini at 4:43 p.m. Eastern time on the 20th, and it's going to be here until September 4th.
Oh,
so Mars has a little bit of a longer visit throughout each sign that it enters. So Mars in Gemini is really great for strategizing, planning. It's kind of considered like the chess master position. And there's this energy of maybe not being as driven toward conflict, but wanting to kind of see multiple sides of a situation, more of like a devil's advocate energy that's happening.
That's cool.
Throughout this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So being able to like see multiple sides and to use that to your benefit for strategy. So it's more about the long game here.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And that sets up on Saturday.
Yeah, that starts on Saturday, going till early September. So throughout the rest of July and August, we'll be kind of working with that strategic energy of Mars.
I think that's great. Thanks, Mars.
And then finally, we're ending on one of the more active days we've seen since July 2nd. July 21st, Sunday, there are multiple transits happening. There's 4 transits happening. So I'm just going to give you a very brief rundown of what that kind of looks like. At 4:43 p.m., Venus sextiles Jupiter. 6:20 p.m., Mercury squares Uranus. 11:25 p.m., the Sun trines Neptune. And at 11:47 p.m., Mars trines Pluto. So Venus sextile Jupiter is really great for like enthusiastic, optimistic connections with other people. It can be lucky in love and friendship. Mercury square Uranus, very talkative, very chatty, restless mind, maybe putting your foot in your mouth. So just being aware of that. Mm-hmm. You might find it hard to calm the brain. Sun trine Neptune is very spiritual, very compassionate. So there's kind of a lot going on. There's a melding of energies. Mars trine Pluto is a big transit. We're going to feel that into the start of next week. And that is great for leadership and taking charge and going after what is, what your goals are, going after what you want, believing in your worth and taking action towards it.
So, man, we have a crazy start to the week and a crazy end to it, sounds like.
Yes, but then there's a couple days where there's not much happening.
Just gotta breathe. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the week. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ash.
You're welcome.
You ready to jump into the topic this time?
I am.
This is one that I think when we started the idea of this podcast, this is something that I wanted to do. And I'm happy that it was only 7 episodes in that I guess I would say that the stars aligned and made this possible for me. This episode is going to be about Egyptian mysticism.
I'm so excited. When you told me that, I immediately grabbed my lapis lazuli pendant to wear because that's an Egyptian stone.
Absolutely. I love that. I think as we're diving into Egyptian mysticism, I also want to make the call out that I'm not an expert. And I'm really kind of focusing more so on the West's obsession with what it believed Egyptian mysticism was going to be in the early 1900s versus getting into the Hermetic Dawn, that type of stuff. So I know that you love Egypt as much as I do.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell me what you know about the hyperfixation the world had with Egypt in the late 1800s, early 1900s?
I think a lot of it had to do with the archaeology that was kind of taking off, and people were going to Egypt to explore the tombs and to do archaeological digs. And so people were just, because they were coming off the spiritualist movement, ancient Egypt was very much about spiritualism, preserving the dead and preserving all of this spiritual knowledge. So I think there was just a natural draw toward that.
And what draws you to it?
When I was a kid, I was just inexplicably obsessed with Egypt to the point where I studied mummification rituals as a young child.
I would wrap my stuffed animals in toilet paper, mummy wraps and stuff like that.
That's crazy. I would make my mom play mummy with me, make my mommy play mummy with me. And I would be like, okay, these are the canopic jars. And I would have random pickle jars and
That's
stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'd be like, okay, the brain, we throw that out, but the kidneys go in this jar. I was a weird,
you knew
weird
as a kid
child.
that they throw the brain out. That's awesome.
I was deeply awed, but yes, I loved it. I don't even know. I was just so drawn to it. I still am. I think it's beautiful. Going to a museum and getting to see mummies and canopic jars, I cried.
The last I went to DC for my birthday.
Yeah.
And as soon as I was in, I think it's the Natural History Museum there, they had a wing of Egyptian artifacts. And it's funny because when I see stuff like that, there's two people in my life. It's Rihanna Wilson that I send pictures to, and it's you.
Yes.
And you guys both are always as excited as I would be for seeing that. Like, it's just crazy to me.
I got to see a cat mummy when I was there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think like I've always loved cats too. Like, I think it just goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And that's them showing that they love cats because that
did.
was a huge honor, you know? So let's dive into some of the ancient belief systems there, just really high level, okay? Because like we would be here for days if we were going to talk about, So Egyptian beliefs were surrounded by a complex structure of polytheism, which meant that they worshiped many gods. And all of these practices also not only worshiped the gods, but were done so in a way to empower the pharaoh. He was the closest thing to the gods, which sounds really familiar to like Catholicism. We have a pope. They both have funny hats. Like, I think that's the only commonality there.
Yeah.
But in the Victorian era, it was popular culture was just starting to discover these beliefs in their art and especially the treasures. I think the treasure fact is what really pushed people faster to become famous based on their discoveries of Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
This craze predated proper archaeology, which is a problem, right? It turned into a term that I read called Egyptomania.
Yep.
Where that you start to see the fashion of ancient Egypt that was found in the hieroglyphics is starting to appear on women in the Victorian the Victorian times. They created jewelry. They imported statues from the country. And have you ever heard of the paint color mummy brown before?
No.
So this is
like a nail polish shade.
You should look it up. It's really cool. It only got discontinued and outlawed in the 60s, but there's a specific color of like a golden brown that painters used to use, and it was mummy dust. Like
it was literally
mummy dust. And so mummy brown is mummies, and that's obviously why it's outlawed now.
That is beyond messed up.
You should look at it. It's such a cool thread to go down.
Wow.
Okay, anyways, we're jumping back into now the excavations. It's William Matthew Flinders Petrie. God,
is that one person?
That's one person. Okay. I hope I got that name right. He's considered to be the father of Egyptian archaeology, and he began in Egypt in the mid 1880s, and then news swept through the Western world of what he was doing. More people arrived, and also funding arrived. Dig sites expanded. Archaeologists swarmed because they were trying to get famous, and because of this, Egypt was grossly exploited. And unfortunately, like some of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the time also meant that treasures and artifacts that belong in Egypt are now all over the world. You know, like they're still trying to get stuff back to Egypt that it's like, why are some of the best mummies in England? You know, I've always wondered that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was very much a British presence in Egypt.
It's the imperialism is why there are mummies outside of Egypt. You know, like this is not where they were buried. This is not where their society wanted them to be.
I'm still partially back on Mummy Brown. I'm trying to move beyond it, but
we'll have to do like a Patreon exclusive. I'll go deep on Mummy Brown. Okay. So as part of these goods that are now like circling the world, people who could afford Egypt items were doing so because of the cool notoriety that you own a piece of Egypt, but also it dipped into the Egyptian magic because, like you mentioned, spiritualism's big. People are open to the idea of magic. Here is a culture that their belief system is very different than, Western Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
So one of these items is called a Ushabti. I hope I pronounced that right.
Okay.
They're little teeny carved figurines of mummies that were used in funereal practices. And they also took on the mantle of good luck charms in the Western world. And that specific item is what's going to lead us into this week's star chart.
Okay.
So I don't have a time for you again, but I can.
It's the 1800s.
Yeah, right. Lucky we have a place. But so it's 7/18/1867, Hannibal, Missouri.
Okay. So first things first, this person has a grand cross in their chart.
A grand cross. That's a new term for me.
Yeah, a grand cross is considered one of the most difficult aspects in astrology. So it is 2 T-squares that are perfectly like lined up with each other. So you have 2 oppositions that are crossing over each other that are then forming a series of squares. So it's a literal square in the center of the chart with like an X through it. So it's kind of like a jacked up mystic rectangle, but the mystic rectangle has some positive aspects, whereas this is just hard aspects all the way through.
Okay.
So it's very difficult, but you often find this in people that are either have like notoriously difficult lives or people that are notoriously resilient. So it would be one or maybe both.
You did it again, Ash. You did it again.
You did it again. Okay. So let's talk about that Grand Cross. So this person has their sun in Cancer, which makes sense because we're in Cancer season. They have their moon in Aquarius, and the sun is not involved in the Grand Cross, but the moon is. The moon is opposing over to Mercury in Leo. Then their Saturn in Scorpio is opposing over to Pluto in Taurus, and those are forming that Grand Cross. So what that tells me about this person is they are somebody who has a hard time holding back their feelings.
Wow.
This is okay.
Yeah,
that's hitting.
don't even need to explain. Don't go any further if you don't need to.
We'll leave it alone. Saturn opposite Pluto was a generational aspect that a lot of people had that were born around this Civil War era or like post Civil War era. And that, when combined with everything, it does seem like there is strength of character here, or at least I would assume that they are encountering a lot of challenges in their life. A lot.
Okay.
Just from looking at the Grand Cross structure. So remember the North Node. Remember we talked about the head of the dragon.
Yes, head of the dragon.
Okay. It is conjunct their Mars in Leo. So this person was not afraid to take chances or to take risks. I'm seeing like almost a daredevil energy, or somebody who's going to push forward no matter what happens. Like it just seems as though, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Dive in.
Stop it. I think I just figured it out.
Do you know who this is?
Were they on the Titanic?
This is the unsinkable Molly Brown. Good job.
Every time I was singing, like they couldn't, like they just kept trying. You were just like communicating with me almost like telepathically. And then I did know something about the Titanic with Egyptian stuff. So it just clicked. I did not see it until then. But okay, yes, Mars North Node would mean that they are unsinkable. They're going to try. They're going to keep going.
They are. There it is.
There it is. There it is. Okay, so they also have an unaspected sun, which is called a peregrine planet. So when you
Two new terms in this episode.
When you have a planet or a planetary body, like the sun is not a planet, but it's a planetary body. When you have something like that that's unaspected, it's called peregrine. So what it means is it's kind of floating off on its own. It has no other planets to keep it in check or to make contact with it. So that can mean that the person either has a hard time accessing that energy, or it kind of controls them to some extent. So that's their identity. Their identity is big. So in this case, obviously, like her reputation precedes her.
Yeah, for sure.
So
100 years later, too.
Exactly. Like this is a big personality, and the sun is like our ego and our personality. So it's notable.
So that's why someone's name can be in the history books changed from Molly Tobin to the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Exactly.
And have it held that way.
Literally, like that's how we know her. And I'm just thinking about Kathy Bates now in Titanic. But yeah, so just now that I know who this is, I'm like briefly looking. She's got all this Cancer planet energy. It makes sense that she would almost have like difficulty with water, like because there's water placements in the Grand Cross. I don't know, just my random thinking.
I love it. I love that you figured it out from the stars while you're reading it, because good call too, by the way. That was awesome to have you connect.
I can't believe that I figured it out. Okay, that's the second one.
I love that you figured it out. You ready to learn a little bit about Molly Brown?
Yeah, I don't know too much, honestly, beyond her time on the Titanic.
So it's actually kind of cool. I'll try to find a picture of this. We stopped at her birth house on the way back from one of the Western haunt me trips.
In Hannibal, Missouri?
Yes, we did.
Wow.
We just went out of the way because I was like, I'll never be this close to Hannibal, Missouri again. So I've been at this place I'm about to tell you about. Molly Tobin was born in a small 3-room cottage in Missouri and grew up with 4 siblings, a mother who worked at grammar school, and a father who worked at a gas plant. So this house was very small. So it was cool to see such a big personality even come out of it.
Yeah.
She had I'm not going to say a rough childhood, but thinking about the Grand Cross, she had to work very hard for her family.
Yes.
To help keep them afloat, help keep things in order. And it wasn't until she actually moved to Colorado and married James Joseph Brown that her notoriety even began at all because of his affluence and his money.
Okay.
So it's in 1893. Her husband hit big with mining, and the Browns are soon able to move up their social ladder as well as their home, and they move into a large Victorian mansion from a small cottage. This is if you watch the Titanic movie, this is the new money that everyone's looking down on.
Yes.
So her social status began to elevate and giving her the platform she needed to improve women's lives through continued education and philanthropy. Again, she's a big personality that believes in her opinions and she wants to push them out in the world. And thank God she did, because, she's basically a feminist,
Yeah, Mercury opposite moon. Like, there's no keeping your thoughts and feelings inside with that.
So her husband loved that because, that's not like most people at the time. And so they began to drift apart, and they were married for 23 years before they officially separated. However, it seems like he still really loved her. And allowed her to travel and continue with her political work because that was what was really important to her. So she was given $700 a month to live on and continue her life.
A lot back then.
Do you know how much it is?
No.
$24,000 a month was her stipend that her husband gave her.
Okay, Molly.
So that's
that bag.
That accessible the accessibility to money is why we then find her in Paris in 1912.
Okay.
So she's over there. She's spending time visiting her daughter and also visiting John Jacob Astor, who we all know had a primary role in the Titanic. So she's over there and she's socializing with these people when she finds out that her oldest grandchild in Denver has fallen ill and she needs to get home as fast as possible. Astor's there. It's the Titanic is the fastest way home.
Wow.
Can you imagine? So we all
can't
know
ever be easy for someone with a Grand Cross.
We're gonna take the Titanic home because it's the fastest way home. That's a Grand Cross moment. You think?
Yeah, I think so. Like, yeah, it might be fast, but you're gonna have to really struggle now and maybe forever through that experience.
But also, thank God she was there, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to skip over. We all know what happened to the Titanic.
Yeah,
we're looking at Molly right now. So Molly continued her passion for helping others on the Titanic. As this crippled ship is sinking, she's notably figured in history as staying on board as long as she could to help children and women into the lifeboats. And that just blows my mind that, as a woman, she's pushing off men who are trying to get her to evacuate because she knows she has the skills to move forward. She's lived this Grand Cross. She's like, nope, you guys might be new to the Grand Cross, but I'm Molly Brown.
Exactly. Like, that's the difference between all the trines and the Grand Cross. Like, if you have too many trines, you could have been panicking on the Titanic, but she had the Grand Cross. She's used to this level of stress.
I love that. That's such a good metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not quite that level of stress, but she's used to
Titanic level of stress almost.
Some might call it a Titanic level of stress.
So this Titanic level of stress hits Molly on April 15th. The ship is sinking, right? It hit on the 14th. We're going down on the 15th. It's the middle of the night. She's finally persuaded to abandon ship and gets in board with lifeboat number 6 and becomes one of the 706 survivors out of 2,224 total passengers. So true to her nature, though, they're rescued by the RMS Carpathia. And while on board, Molly Brown, and I had no idea about this before, because you only ever hear about the ship sinking.
Right.
She gets on board the Carpathia. She rounds up the first class passengers, who lots of them survived, and presses upon them that the second and third class passengers who have survived have lost their families, lost their moneymakers, the support system, because obviously it's women and children got off the boat. They have nothing to go back to. And she forces the first class passengers to create an ad hoc charity to help support these families upon docking in New York City, and even made way to help these family members who survived the Titanic get professional counseling.
That's amazing.
Right? She's so much cooler than I even thought she was.
Wow. What a hero.
Do you know what her connection to Egyptian mysticism is, though, specifically?
I don't know specifically. All I know is that there was supposedly a mummy on the Titanic, but I don't think that has to do with that from what I'm gathering.
I can't confirm the mummy on the Titanic.
That might be an urban legend.
We'll go back to episode 2. Was that? Yeah. So this is really cool. And I had no idea about this, but because Molly was a woman of resources, there's no record of when she came into possession of this item, but Molly Brown had a Ushibti on her. So when she was forced to evacuate her room, she considered it her good luck charm. So she slips it into her pocket of her jacket and abandons ship in the middle of the morning. When she is rescued by the Carpathia, she forces a meeting with Captain Roston to personally give the man her thanks, and then also gives him the symbol of her protection because he was her protector. And he passes the Ushibti on to the man who helped save her life.
That's amazing.
And that's Molly Brown.
That's beautiful. I love that. She is such a good role model. And looking at her chart, this is a really good example. Like if you have a really difficult aspect in your chart, if you've had your birth chart read, or if you have a Grand Cross, just know that like
you could become Molly Brown.
You could, like there's so much triumph over adversity here.
Absolutely.
Love it.
So thank you for letting me like highlight a topic that I'm really interested in, and a character in history that I just have so much respect for, and gained even more respect from doing this research.
Amazing. I'm gonna have to look up the Ushibtis.
Yeah, they're cool little teeny figurines that look like just little mummies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were pretty common of that time period as trinkets that basically the West would buy.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and you know where to find us. The Patreon is linked down below, and our social media links as well if you want to follow us there. And if you want a further deep dive into all the transits for this week, you can hop on over to Patreon.
Yeah, Ash goes in depth, guys. If you want something, that you aren't getting from the podcast, it's there.
Oh, yeah. If you can't get enough of this podcast and you just want more astrology, more, that's where you go.
Unfortunately, there are no Ushibtis for sale on the Patreon.
No.
Not even one.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. You're doing the right thing.
I don't think I have the right to sell that.
No, you don't.
Okay.
But you do have the right to tune into this podcast weekly, and we'll hit you up next week with another forecast of the remainder of what season are we on right now?
We're going to go into Leo season, and I got a little treat for you planned next week.
Okay. Let's do it.
All right. We'll talk to you guys then. Unclouded Eye stars Ashley Brooks and Ty Gowan. It's produced and directed by Nick Nordfors. Music by Ashley Jane Cecilia and Jay Karen. Our community manager is Aaron Cross. Art by Don Aquarius. Presented by Haunt Me. Follow Unclouded Eye on Instagram or TikTok. Find us on Patreon. Special shout out to patrons Christina K and Aaron A. Thank you for your support.